Ladies and gentlemen, on this Red Gaming Typical video, we're going to be taking a look at the Radeon R7 250 from AMD. We're going to be actually taking a look at his version. So I'm going to be just showing you guys off the box first, although obviously we have got an article with all the benchmarks and much better screenshots as well. So this is the ICooler version, and it's using 1GB of GDDR5 memory, so you can see the box. Rather spiffing, might I add. Let me just open that up for you guys. So this is the engineering sample, and by the way, in case you're wondering about the beanie, this is actually the infamous beanie. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'll put better screenshots of it, or images on it, shall I say, on Facebook for anyone who wants to check it out. It's pretty cool. It's a limited edition version. So I thought I'd just wear it because I promised people I would show it off. So I'm just going to get the card as well. Very organised here at RGT, of course. So it's actually a fairly small card, as one can see. But as I said, there are better images of it on the website. So this is using the special ICT model. It's extremely cool under even 100% fan speed. I did check that, although you certainly don't need it during operation. So this is using 384 shaders, which are running at 1050 megahertz peak, which can actually be slightly overclocked. You can get 1200 megahertz out of it. That's basically pushing the sliders all the way up to their maximum. Memory is using 128-bit interface. That's with 1GB, as I've said, of GDDR5 memory. That's running at 4.8 gigahertz. It's overclockable for 5.2. That's effective, of course. Which, you know, normal clock speed, you're looking at about 73.6 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, which is pretty much part and parcel of what you'd expect for a card of this type of price range. So this card's actually pretty powerful for what you get. 384 shaders, provides you with about 800 GFLOPS of computing power. And considering the price range of this card, which falls into around the 60 Great British Pounds mark for the 1GB of GDDR5 memory model, it's, you know, a pretty good purchase. Here's the thing, there is GDD3 available, but I'd personally recommend not going for the DDR3 because, honestly speaking, it's probably not worth the sacrifice in bandwidth. So we did various testing, as you'll see throughout the video, and the card actually performs pretty damn well in pretty much all of the tests. Tomb Raider, for example, scores pretty well. You're able to play between high and ultra, which is one setting below ultimate, although obviously you have to disable TressFX because that's extremely GPU intensive. And for the most part, you're getting around the 30 frames per second mark, depending, obviously it dances around depending on what's going on the screen. In tighter, more enclosed areas, especially those with less lighting, you know, it can go up to about the 40 range. On the other hand, more open environments with tons of foliage and a lot of different light sources and, for example, a lot of animals on screen, that type of thing, then the frame rate can go to around the 30 mark, which is still pretty damn playable.
So arguably one of the largest competitors to this card, ironically enough, is actually from AMD themselves, and that would be the 7750. The 7750 does feature double the amount of ROPs, that's 16 versus 8. By the way, just to reiterate, all of the specs are in the written review, along with the system specifications we're using for benching. And for the most part, you know, the fewer ROP count is going to make a difference on anti-aliasing. However, having said that, we have done testing with FXAA and the card handles it very little problems indeed. And of course, you're not really going to be using MSAA x4 or whatever anyway. And for the most part, if you're happy to run the game at 1080p or lower, obviously up to you if you wish to make that sacrifice, then you're not going to have too much of a big deal, because you're probably going to run into bandwidth constraints or pure GPU clock speed issues. And obviously, because it does have a higher core clock than 7750, this does help to offset that. In terms of connections, you'll notice that you do have HDMI, DVI, and VGA, which the VGA connection may seem a little bit of an odd choice, but obviously the card does happily support audio over HDMI and all the other goodies that you would expect. In terms of the cooler, it's pretty damn quiet, honestly. even at 100% fan speed, not that you'll need it with this card, just to reiterate, but even if you were to, for whatever reason, decide to push it that high, it's going to be pretty much inaudible, even for my case. Taking off the side and being fairly close to it, it's certainly not going to be that offensive to you, which obviously is a pretty good thing. So the card itself handled pretty much all of the tests flawlessly. We were running, for example, Tomb Raider, and Tomb Raider, if we were to set it on Ultra, which is just prior to the Ultimate settings, obviously TressFX disabled, you were able to get around 30 to 37 frames a second, obviously depending on what's going on the screen, which is pretty impressive to say the least. Bioshock Infinite can be played on medium or high. Obviously, a lot of this depending on what you're willing to put up with. Certainly, if you're happy for the frame rate to maybe go down a little bit in certain open areas, then you're able to crank up the settings a little bit. Similarly, Batman, even with FXAA turned up to high, might I add, most of the stuff turned onto either DX11 or enabled. Obviously, you guys can check out the graphics settings that appear on screen. It all run nicely and beautifully, and you'll get a rather nice 33 frames per second average in the built-in benchmark, which is more than playable. It means it's going to look better than, say, the Xbox 360 and PS3, significantly so actually in some cases, and you've still got a frame rate which is slightly higher. Similarly, Metro Last Light, depending on what you want to do. Now, tessellation does take a large toll on the card. With the built-in benchmark, you're going to be seeing it go all the way down to 26. On the other hand, if you disable tessellation, then you're going to be getting a much more healthy 33.3. Now, the card does overclock quite nicely. 1200 MHz on the core, 5200 MHz up to on the memory, and this obviously does improve memory bandwidth quite substantially, as well as throughput, in other words, core performance. And you'll be, depending on the application and what you're doing, going to be seeing around 10%. For example, Firestrike is certainly going to go up a little bit, from 2081 if you do not have the card overclocked, to around 2250 if you decide to overclock the card. So the card does sit at a very low price point, which is obviously a great thing for those who are looking to purchase for either a cheap system. It's great, for example, if you want to play mainstream games, or if you're interested in playing games like, say, Counter-Strike, Source, League of Legends, StarCraft 2. It's certainly going to be able to rip through those games fairly easily, and it's not really worth benchmarking them, simply because, for example, the Source engine is so old. So in that respect, it's great. But ironically enough, the card actually has quite a lot of competition from AMD's own lineup, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So let's discuss this just a smidgen. So two of the main competitors the card actually has come from AMD themselves. That would be the 250X as well as the 260. The 250X is going to cost you around 20 to maybe 30 extra, depending on the brand and manufacturing and just how lucky you are with the prices at the time. And the 260X is going to cost you a little bit more than that. Once again, around 20 to 30 as a jump. If you were to be able to pay that, you're going to get obviously a significantly more powerful system. But obviously then you've got to find that cash. From AMD's own main competitor, NVIDIA, you've of course got the 750 and the 750 Ti, both of which are pretty impressive performers, but once again they are also more expensive. We've say the 750 Ti, or Ti, however you wish to pronounce it, being extremely impressive for what it is, but you're also going to be looking at around the £110 mark. Now, this card is also pretty interesting for those who wish to do Crossfire, because obviously there are a couple of options here. If you do happen to have, say, the A10, you could certainly do Crossfire, and you're going to definitely see a large performance increase, both in Mantle and DX11. Likewise, as you would expect, you could, say, put two of these cards together as well, which is certainly an option. I don't necessarily agree with the plan of buying like a cheap card and then going Crossfire later, necessarily, because sometimes you're better off just buying like a higher end card anyway. So Of course, as you would expect, the drivers were completely stable. We were testing with the beta drivers, which are the 14.3 betas, and obviously no issues there whatsoever. Everything just worked flawlessly. The card also does have another benefit. It doesn't require an additional power plug, and so if you're just looking to power something straight off the PCIe on your motherboard, then this is certainly a good choice. Overall, I would recommend this card for those of you who are looking to buy either a cheap system, maybe a secondary gaming system for, say, LAN parties, if you're looking to, say, take it around friends' houses or competitive events, that type of thing, particularly if the game you're playing isn't super demanding anyway. It's great, of course, for HTTP PCs, and of course you've also got the streaming from Steam, which is certainly going to be a nice touch. Overall, I don't really have anything bad to say about the card, and I was actually pretty impressed. Normally, my own test rig is the GTX 780 Ti. That's usually what I use to actually play games, and I wasn't expecting huge performance from this card. I don't typically use this type of price range card, yet it performed pretty well in almost all of the tests. Even Metro, as I said, 30 frames per second on medium is pretty impressive considering just how graphically intensive that game actually is. If you're on a tight budget and you're looking to put together a system, or even if you just want a spare card, for example, let's say you're someone who regularly upgrades the graphics card and they're just looking for something to, say, tide them over, particularly if you want something a little bit better than this typical integrated graphics card on, say, the Haswell, obviously this does perform significantly better than that. LAN events or the other stuff that we've mentioned, this is a great purchase. It's also worth noting that this card, of course, does support AMD's Mantle technology, although you're probably not going to be seeing a huge increase in performance on such a low-level card, but even so, it does offer a slight amount of testing. We did do some messing about with Thief, and there was indeed 1 or 2 frames per second difference utilising Mantle. Primarily, at least from what I've noticed, the lower frame rate definitely seemed to be a little bit higher. And so anyway, hopefully you guys have found this video helpful if you're considering picking up kind of a mainstream graphics card. So anyway, hopefully I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.